Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wobbler94. I hope you're doing well today. I have a book review, basically reviewing the same book again that I just reviewed yesterday. This one is the revised and complete edition from 2006 of Richard Lehman's The Woods Are Dark. Of course, this came out after he died, about 5 years after he died, and was mainly put together by Kelly Lehman, his daughter. I think her name is Kelly, who essentially went through a bunch of boxes of manuscripts to put together the original novel that Richard Lehman had turned in and had tried to publish, but it had been chopped up so much by Warner Books. By the way, I happen to have that book. I just reviewed this version, read it for the first time, finished it yesterday, reviewed it and everything. Lehman hated this. He feels like it ruined his entire career in America due to the continuity errors, due to many different issues with it. At some points, as a matter of fact, in his nonfiction book, A Writer's Tale, talking about his entire career, his books, all those different things, he even mentioned that there were some people, I assume like interns and stuff, from Warner Books who published this, that even rewrote the book. And you can tell there are certain times where, especially after reading these two back to back, that you can feel entire scenes losing the heart they had, losing the clarity in the paragraphs and the sentences that you're reading about. There's a lot of issues with this. As much as I enjoyed this book, there's a lot of issues between them. However, I do have a little bit of a thing I want to tell you at first, before I get into the plot and everything else. As I read this book, I wanted to read them back to back, mainly because I've only read this one once upon a time, a long time ago, back in the summer of 2009 when I got into reading again. I went into a Barnes & Noble, I picked up a couple of Stephen King books, mainly Pet Sematary and Bag of Bones, and then I looked around and I think I also found this book first. This may have been my first Lehman book that I actually picked up and bought, but I read The Woods Are Dark first. I bought the second. The first one I ever picked up was Darkness Tell Us, and this is my original copy of this. I have like 2 or 3 of these for some reason. Every time I buy book lots, this comes with it because it's such a common read. Really great book, though, from what I remember. But I had this that I bought, and then I bought this, and I read this first. This is my original copy of Woods Are Dark as well. I am a big, big fan of Woods Are Dark, this version. I loved it back then. I've only read it the one time, back in summer of 2009. And to have a complete copy, it's just slightly longer by a couple of pages, I think. Mainly because the font in this one is massive. The font in this one is kind of, regular size that you'd have for your typical Lehman novel. There are differences between the two books, quite a bit, as a matter of fact. There are scenes that are even rewritten very differently. I do want to make that as a point out, too. But there's a lot of massive differences that come with these two versions. I won't spoil anything, I promise you. These are spoiler-free reviews unless I make a video saying otherwise. But for a spoiler-free review, I do have to kind of cover the big difference in content between the two. I won't spoil things, I won't ruin things, like I said, but there are massive differences. However, in my previous review for the original version, this old green published book, I said that there was like a 95% difference after Chapter 8 between the two books, and I was wrong. There's just a lot of things apparently I didn't remember. However, I will say about 60% of the novel is completely different. Completely different. Maybe even closer to 65% of the book is completely different from this complete original novel that was supposed to come out. That ended up being the new revised, complete, but it was the OG book. Anyway, let's start off with the plot, like we do with all these reviews. The Woods Are Dark, essentially, there is a difference between this one and the previous one because there's a lot of perspectives we follow in this one that we didn't follow in the previous one, and some from the previous book are eliminated, which was weird and it kind of tightened things up, I think, but I'll get there in a moment. So, for example, the story itself starts off with Sherry and Neela, who are two friends going out on a hiking trip, and as they're driving into a town, they happen to see a little legless, gross, as I described in my previous review, he looks like Slimer from Ghostbusters. A little creep crawling across the road, and he throws a decapitated head into their car. And they're grossed out by this, and what do? They do the thing that none of us would do. They take it, they throw it out of the car, and then they go to eat dinner at a diner in town. Yeah. Now, when they get in there, they're actually held hostage by the people inside of the diner. They lock up the doors, they rob these two, they tie them up, and a bunch of the men take them out to a place called the Killing Trees. Apparently this town has this idea that they basically need to kidnap people that come in as passers-by I don't know if they do this to just everybody. Do they set traps the further you drive in? I don't know, but it seems like if you stop somewhere, they catch you. And they basically caught these two, Sherry and Neela. They take them out to the killing trees. They leave them there for some kind of group of people that apparently live in the woods that they're calling, the townsfolk are calling, Krull, or Krulls, Krulls. And nobody really knows what these are. The thing I will tell you about this version of the book, you do know pretty early on what the Krulls do with people. And that's a good thing, because the previous version, the original published book from 1981, you don't really know until like the end of the book. And it's even kind of so vague, and I think that has to do with a lot of the rewrites and the continuity errors that Layman complained about. There's so many issues there that book isn't entirely clear on that. This book is. This book is. Now, we also follow another family as kind of a sideline, and both books have this as well. So there's kind of like, in each version of the book, there's like 3 different perspectives we follow. I forgot to mention that in my original Woods Are Dark review that I just put up yesterday. Essentially, in that book, you also follow not just Neela and Sherry, not just the family I'm about to talk about, not just Johnny, who I'm about to talk about, but also a mother and daughter who are the sister and niece of Johnny. And that's kind of off and on throughout the book that you focus on that. They're completely cut from this book. They're completely gone. So you basically just follow also Johnny trying to go save Neela and Sherry, and eventually that kind of just becomes one storyline of them, trying to escape the woods and whatever. But it seems like to me that the sister and daughter are completely gone from this book at all. It's not just their perspective, it's like their existence doesn't exist here, which is wild to me. Now, there is a family coming through into the town. They happen to go to a hotel, and they stop there for the night. There's basically a father named Lander, there's a mom, and then there's and by the way, the mom's name is Ruth. There's there's a daughter named Cordy, and then she has a boyfriend named Ben. And the mom and dad, they're trying to, just enjoy, I guess, a vacation, basically. Something like that. I forgot exactly why they're going through the town. Anyway, Lander and the family get kidnapped, and they're taken to the killing trees, too. Now, Johnny, who is one of the men who took Neela and Sherry, and also this family, to the killing trees, he starts to feel guilty. He decides he's going to go back and he's going to try to save Neela, who he thinks is a very beautiful woman. And he goes out there to save her, and essentially he ends up getting stuck in a situation because of Neela where she wants to rescue everybody else. And so they cut everybody out of their chains and ropes and whatever and try to rescue them. Now, as they're getting through, Ruth, the mom of the family, is gone. So Lander says, okay, well, I need to go find her. And he goes on a mission by himself to go find her. Cordy and Ben go on a mission, too, later on to go find, the mom and dad, Lander and Ruth. And Neela and Sherry and Johnny try to go on their own way to get out of here, out of the woods. Because the woods are insane. This group of people that they're running from, called the Krulls, are very tribalistic. We don't really know much about them until about midway through the book. The book is about 210 pages. So you kind of, have a lot going on at one time. And I will say this, I kind of mentioned this briefly. This version of the book is about 65% different from the original green foliage covered book, whatever this is. I think this book is better. After reading it again this time, I definitively say, I think I like this version of the book better. This one just feels more complete. And again, a lot of the scenes are tinged with heart and soul that I really think works. It really works. However, there is one part to this review that I need to bring up. Even though the original book had an idea of focusing on the sister and the niece of Johnny, they're, like I said, pretty much eliminated. This story also takes time to have chapters dedicated to Lander, because Lander, being in the situation that he's in, pretty much stuck by himself in the woods, he kind of has a little bit of a journey of himself. And like every other chapter, we're focusing on Lander going through some craziness out in the woods while he's trying to find Ruth, his wife, and Cordy, his daughter, and Ben, the daughter's boyfriend, but mainly Cordy and Ruth. He didn't care about Ben. And he kind of goes a little wild. A little wild. Those chapters are straight up Layman. And that kind of thing I think was missing from that original book. This original book right here that I keep showing you. Now this one here, this complete and revised version, It's very much more Layman. But again, it's not just because of the violence, the rapey stuff, the pervert stuff. It's not just because of that with the typical splatterpunk stuff that Layman really fashioned around his books. It's more about, it feels like Layman. There can be heart and soul. There are moments that are genuinely kind of sad. There are moments that are not written exactly the way the Green Book was, the original book release. And it works. I like it a lot. I think this book is a better book all around. And I did forget when I read this book back in 2009 that it does have some partial elements that could or could not point to some supernatural stuff. And that's kind of debatable. There are certain things that are in this book that are not in the Green Book when it comes to that partially supernatural, possibly supernatural type of thing. Anyway, the point is, there's a lot to discuss around these two, and not many people have read both versions. So that's kind of a sad situation, because I would love to hear what other people have to say about both versions of this book. Every time I recommend The Woods Are Dark to people, they don't really like it. It's kind of a clash between Wrong Turn and The Hills Have Eyes. I forgot to mention that in my previous review as well. And I just really all around enjoy it. If you like gore, if you like Layman, this is your kind of book. It's a short read, it flies by. I think it's better than some of his other shorter books, like All Hallows Eve, for example, which I like that one too. It's not perfect. Another thing I do want to bring up as well, just as a small difference, since this will probably be the last time I talk about these books for a while, the ending on this book was very rushed. The way it ended, it just zoomed by really quick. It tries to tie things together, but it's just too quick, and it ends in a way like All Hallows Eve did, and kind of like Resurrection Dreams did by Richard Layman. So that ending's rewrite, that could have been somebody from Warner Books, and that could have been Layman at the same time. I'm not really sure. But I will say this, The Woods Are Dark Revised and Complete Edition, the newer version, I think it rounds up everything perfectly. I think the pacing on it's perfect throughout the entire book, even better than the original version's pacing. That one, for some reason, feels faster. I don't know why, but this one has perfect pacing, in my opinion. It just feels like a better book. It feels like a Layman book, you know. So God bless Kelly Layman for putting this together. Kelly, thank you so much for getting us all of this book back in 2006. I really wish Layman hadn't passed away. There's a lot of cool stuff we could have gotten from him and a lot of cool content. The PC nature of nowadays would not be happy with Layman's work. They still aren't. They still aren't. They're still mad all the time about it. Anyway, when it comes to the revised and complete version of The Woods Are Dark, which is really technically the original OG book, if I had to rate this one on a 5-star basis, I'd probably give it closer to a 4 out of 5 stars. It's got flaws, it's got problems, but stuff like the weird grammatical errors, the weird sentence structure and paragraph structure and all that, they're not in this book because Layman actually wrote this book. And it's good. It's a really solid one. It's a fun one. The fun is really the crazy part of this book that I enjoyed. It is insane. If you haven't read a Layman book before, I could kind of recommend you starting here, but it's not his best, you know. I would almost recommend starting at Darkness Tell Us, which is the one I have right here, or his other book that I reviewed a while back called Island, which I love to death. I think it's a great book. So, what are your thoughts? Put them down below, guys, if you've read both of these versions or one of these versions. I'd love to hear everything you have to say down in the comment section down below. And again, I'd give it a 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. Thank you for watching. God bless you guys, and goodbye.